The bitter wind rattled the windows of Hannah Parker's small farmhouse on the outskirts of Sioux Falls, Dakota Territory, as she clutched the eviction notice in her trembling hands. The year was 1879, and the December snow had already piled high against the door, a cruel reminder that winter had only just begun. Her husband's death 6 months prior had left her with mounting debts, a struggling farm, and 3 young children depending on her strength to survive. "You have until noon tomorrow," Mr. Blackwell, the banker, had told her just hours before, his voice as cold as the wind that howled through the cracks in her walls. "The new owner wants immediate possession." Hannah crumpled to the floor beside the dying embers in the fireplace, her children asleep in the next room, blissfully unaware that by this time tomorrow they would have no home. The farm had been her husband's dream, and now it was being ripped away just when they needed shelter most. Miles Irwin pulled his coat tighter as he rode his chestnut stallion through the deepening snow. New to Sioux Falls, he had purchased land sight unseen based on rumors of fertile soil and opportunity in Dakota Territory. His years working cattle in Texas had prepared him for hardship, but not for the bone-chilling cold of a northern winter. His breath came out in visible puffs as he followed the banker's directions to what would soon be his property. As he approached the modest farmhouse, smoke curled from the chimney, and lamplight spilled from frost-covered windows. He frowned. Blackwell had assured him the place would be vacant upon his arrival. Hannah jumped at the knock on her door. It was nearly midnight. Who would be out in such weather? Grabbing her husband's old revolver from the mantel, she approached cautiously. "Who's there?" she called, voice stronger than she felt. "Miles Irwin, madam. I believe I've purchased this property." Her heart sank. He was a day early. With shaking hands, she opened the door to reveal a tall man with broad shoulders, a dark beard dusted with snow, and eyes that reflected the golden lamplight. "Mr. Irwin," she said, lowering the gun slightly. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." Mr. Blackwell said, "I rode ahead of schedule." His gaze moved past her to the modest interior of the house. "Are you Mrs. Parker?" "Yes. My children are asleep. We'll be gone by noon tomorrow as agreed." Miles stamped his boots, shaking off snow. The woman before him was thin, with shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of exhaustion and grief. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple knot, and despite her evident distress, she stood tall, meeting his gaze directly. "May I come in? Just to warm up before I head back to town," he asked. Hannah hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside. "There's not much heat left in the fire, but you're welcome to what there is." Miles entered, removing his hat and gloves. The home was simple but clean, with signs of care despite obvious poverty. A child's drawing hung on one wall, a patchwork quilt on another. He noticed the eviction notice on the table and the small pile of belongings already packed in the corner. "How many children do you have, Mrs. Parker?" "3. Emma is 7, James is 5, and little Sarah is just 3. Hannah's voice softened at the mention of her children. "And where will you go tomorrow?" Miles asked, warming his hands by the dying embers. Hannah's shoulders stiffened. "I have a distant cousin in Deadwood who might take us in. It's a 3-day journey in good weather. In this blizzard." With 3 small children, Miles looked out the window at the snow that was now falling so thickly it obscured the barn just yards away. "We have no choice, Mr. Irwin. The bank has sold our home and we must leave." Miles stood silently for a moment, taking in the desperate situation. He had saved for years to buy this land, worked from sunup to sundown on other men's ranches, dreaming of the day he'd have his own place. But he hadn't come to displace a widow and her children in the dead of winter. "Mrs. Parker," he said finally, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Hannah looked up, confusion written across her face. "She's not going anywhere," Miles stated firmly, as if making a decision. "Not in this weather, not with those children." "I beg your pardon, I'm saying you can stay." Miles removed his coat, draping it over a chair. "At least until spring." "But the bank sold me this property, and as its new owner, I'm telling you that you and your children are welcome to remain here." Hannah's eyes widened. "Mr. Irwin, I don't understand. You've paid good money for this farm." "And I intend to work it," he replied. "But I won't be responsible for forcing a family into a blizzard. There must be room enough for us all, at least temporarily." "You mean to stay here, with us?" Hannah clutched her shawl tighter. "If that's agreeable to you. I can sleep in the barn until we sort out a more permanent arrangement." Miles met her gaze steadily. "I'm a fair man, Mrs. Parker. I work hard and keep to myself. I won't be a burden." Hannah studied the stranger standing in her home, the home that was no longer hers. His offer was unexpected and possibly improper, but the alternative was unthinkable. "The barn isn't suitable in this weather," she said finally. "There's a small room off the kitchen. It's not much, but it would be warmer." Miles nodded. "That would be more than sufficient, thank you." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of the dying fire and the howl of the wind outside. "I should add more wood," Hannah said, moving toward the door. "Allow me." Miles stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "You've had a trying day, rest. I'll tend to the fire." As he went outside to fetch more firewood, Hannah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the sudden change in circumstances. The man who had purchased her home was now offering shelter, at least temporarily. It wasn't a solution, but it was a reprieve, one she desperately needed. When Miles returned, arms laden with split logs, he found Hannah staring into the embers, lost in thought. "Mrs. Parker," he said softly, not wanting to startle her, "tomorrow I'll speak with Blackwell about the situation." Hannah looked up. "What situation?" "This one." Miles began rebuilding the fire with practiced hands. He didn't mention there was a widow with 3 young children being evicted in the middle of winter. "That's not the kind of business I care to be part of. Mr. Irwin, I don't want your pity." "It's not pity, madam. It's common decency." The fire caught, flames dancing across the new wood. "Now, if you'll show me to that room, I think we could both use some rest." Hannah led him to the small room that had once been a pantry but had been converted to a sleeping space when James was born. It contained a narrow cot and little else. "I'll bring you some blankets," she said, turning to leave. "Mrs. Parker," Miles called after her. When she turned back, he added, "Thank you for your hospitality." "It's your house now, Mr. Irwin. I should be thanking you." "Let's agree that we're both doing what's necessary to survive this winter," he replied with a small smile. Hannah nodded and left to fetch the blankets, wondering what tomorrow would bring with this unexpected arrangement. Morning arrived with blinding whiteness as sunlight reflected off the newly fallen snow. Hannah woke early, as was her habit, and found Miles already in the kitchen, stoking the fire and putting on a pot of coffee. "I hope I didn't wake you," he said, noticing her in the doorway. "No, I'm always up at this hour." Hannah tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, acutely aware that she was still in her nightdress and robe. "I should get dressed. Take your time. Coffee will be ready soon." When Hannah returned, properly dressed and with her hair neatly arranged, she found Miles sitting at the table with Emma, who was chattering excitedly about the fresh snow. "And Mama says we can't go sledding because we have to leave today," Emma was saying, her small face serious. Miles glanced up at Hannah, then back to the child. "Well, I think there might be a change of plans. Your mother and I need to discuss some things." Emma's eyes widened. "Are you the man who bought our farm?" "I am," Miles admitted. "Are you going to make us leave?" Before Miles could respond, Hannah intervened. "Emma, please go wake your brother and sister. I need to speak with Mr. Irwin." Once Emma had scampered off, Hannah poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from Miles. "I appreciate your kindness last night, Mr. Irwin, but I don't want to confuse my children. We still need to make arrangements to leave. Mrs. Parker, I meant what I said. I won't put you out in this weather." "And what happens when the weather improves? We'll still be homeless." Miles considered her question carefully. "I came to Dakota Territory to build something of my own. I need land to raise cattle, but I also need help. This farm is larger than I can manage alone." "What are you suggesting?" "A partnership of sorts. You stay and help me work the land. In return, you and your children have a home." Hannah's cup froze halfway to her lips. "A partnership with a stranger?" "I'm not proposing anything improper, Mrs. Parker. You would retain your own quarters, of course. I simply need someone who knows this land, and you need somewhere to stay." "It seems a practical solution." "People would talk," Hannah said, though she was already considering his offer. "People always talk. Let them. We know the truth of it." The sound of small feet interrupted their conversation as Emma returned with James and little Sarah in tow, all still in their night clothes. "Mama, who's that man?" James asked, hiding partially behind his older sister. "This is Mr. Irwin," Hannah explained. "He's going to be staying with us for a while." "I thought we had to leave," Emma said, confusion evident in her voice. Miles stood and approached the children, crouching down to their level. "My name is Miles. I bought this farm because I want to raise cattle, but I don't know much about farming in Dakota Territory. Your mother does, so I've asked if you all might stay and help me." The children looked to their mother for confirmation. "Mr. Irwin has offered to let us stay," Hannah said carefully. "At least until we figure things out." "So we don't have to go to Cousin Martha's?" Emma asked hopefully. She had met the stern-faced cousin once and hadn't taken to her. "Not right now, no." The children's faces brightened, and even little Sarah clapped her hands in delight. "Now go get dressed," Hannah instructed. "We have chores to do." As the children ran off, Miles turned back to Hannah. "They seem like good kids." "They are," Hannah agreed. "They've been through so much since their father died. This farm is the only home they've ever known." "Tell me about your husband," Miles said, sitting back down. Hannah was surprised by the request but found herself answering. "Thomas was a dreamer. He believed this land could yield anything if we just worked hard enough. He died of pneumonia last spring after a late frost caught him in the fields. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Hannah's fingers traced the rim of her cup. "He left us in debt. The crops failed last summer drought and the bank foreclosed. Mr. Blackwell said he found a buyer immediately." "That was you, I suppose," Miles nodded. "Blackwell painted quite a picture. Prime farmland, he said, ready for immediate occupation. And instead you got a rundown farm with a widow and 3 children. I'd say I got exactly what I needed, Mrs. Parker. Help." Before Hannah could respond, there was a pounding at the door. Miles rose to answer it, finding a red-faced Blackwell on the doorstep, snow up to his knees. "Irwin, what is the meaning of this? I received word you arrived last night, but the Parkers are still here." Miles blocked the doorway, preventing the banker from entering. "That's right. But the agreement was that I purchased this property, which I have. How I choose to manage it is my business." Blackwell sputtered, "But the widow was to be gone by noon today." "She's not going anywhere," Miles stated firmly, loud enough for Hannah to hear from inside. "Not in this weather and not at your say-so. Now, if you've ridden all this way just to check on your eviction, I'm afraid you've wasted your time. This is highly irregular. So is evicting a family in a blizzard. Good day, Mr. Blackwell." Miles began to close the door. "Wait." The banker jammed his foot in the door. There's the matter of her husband's outstanding debts. The sale of the property doesn't cover them entirely. Miles paused. How much remains? Blackwell named a sum that made Miles whistle low. I'll cover it, Miles decided. Add it to my account and draw up the paperwork. I'll be in to sign it when the weather clears. You take on her debts? Blackwell looked incredulous. I'm taking on this farm and everything that comes with it, Miles responded evenly. Now, if there's nothing else, Blackwell withdrew his foot, his expression sour. You'll regret this generosity, Irwin. Mark my words. As Miles closed the door, he turned to find Hannah standing in the kitchen doorway, her face pale. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did. Miles hung his hat on a peg by the door. A fresh start means no old debts hanging over us. Us? Hannah questioned. If we're to be partners in this venture, then yes, us. Miles moved past her into the kitchen where the children were now seated at the table, dressed and waiting for breakfast. Now, who's hungry? The next few days established a tentative routine. Miles slept in the small room off the kitchen, rising before dawn to tend to the few livestock that remained: a milk cow, 2 oxen, and several chickens. Hannah prepared meals and managed the household while the children adjusted to the presence of the tall, quiet man who seemed to fill their small home with his presence. On the 4th day, the blizzard finally subsided, revealing a landscape transformed into rolling white hills. Miles announced his intention to ride into town for supplies. Is there anything specific you need, Mrs. Parker? He asked, pulling on his coat. Hannah hesitated before retrieving a small list she had been compiling. Just essentials: flour, coffee, sugar. But I don't expect you to. We're partners now, remember? Miles took the list, glancing over it. I'll be back before dark. After he left, Emma tugged at her mother's skirt. Mama, why do you still call him Mr. Irwin if you're partners? It's proper, Hannah explained, though she wondered herself why she maintained such formality with the man who had saved them from certain hardship. I like him, Emma declared. He fixed my doll yesterday when the arm came loose. Hannah hadn't known that, did he? Emma nodded enthusiastically. And he told James he'd teach him to ride when the weather gets warmer. These small kindnesses touched Hannah. In the short time Miles had been with them, he had shown a gentleness with her children that she hadn't expected from a cowboy who had spent his life working cattle in the harsh Texas plains. True to his word, Miles returned before sunset, his horse laden with supplies. Among the necessities were unexpected treasures: peppermint sticks for the children, a new wool scarf for Hannah, and a small book of poetry. I noticed you reading last night, Miles explained when he handed her the book. The pages in your Bible were worn thin. Thought you might enjoy something new. Hannah ran her fingers over the leather binding. Thank you. It's been a long time since I've had something new. That evening, after the children were asleep, Hannah and Miles sat by the fire, the new book open on her lap. Would you read aloud? Miles asked. It's been years since I've had the pleasure of hearing poetry. Hannah was surprised by the request, but began to read in a soft, melodious voice. Miles closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him, a small smile playing at his lips. When she finished the poem, Miles opened his eyes. You have a beautiful voice, Mrs. Parker. Hannah, she said suddenly, if we're to be partners, perhaps you should call me Hannah. His smile widened. Hannah, then, and I'm Miles. Something shifted between them that night, a tentative trust taking root in the soil of shared circumstance. As January gave way to February, the bitter cold remained, but inside the farmhouse, warmth grew. Miles proved himself to be not only hardworking but also resourceful. He repaired the leaking roof, reinforced the barn, and even fashioned new toys for the children from scraps of wood. Hannah, for her part, taught Miles about the peculiarities of Dakota farming, what crops had succeeded and failed, which fields drained poorly in the spring thaw, and how to predict the territory's volatile weather patterns. One evening, as they sat planning the spring planting, Miles broached a subject that had been on his mind. "Hannah, I've been thinking about our arrangement." She looked up, a flash of worry crossing her face. "Yes, when I arrived, I spoke of a temporary partnership. But these past weeks have shown me that this farm has potential, real potential, with both of us working it." "What are you suggesting?" Miles leaned forward. "A more permanent arrangement, not just for the winter, but beyond. You know this land better than anyone, and I bring new skills and resources. Together, we could make this place thrive." Hannah set down her pen. "Miles, are you proposing a business arrangement or something else?" The directness of her question caught him off guard, but he appreciated her forthrightness. It was one of the many qualities he had come to admire about her. "I'm proposing what makes sense for both of us," he answered carefully. "I respect you, Hannah, and your children have become important to me. I don't want to see you struggle, and I don't want to lose what we've started building here." "And what have we started building?" Hannah's voice was barely above a whisper. Miles met her gaze steadily. "A home, a partnership. Maybe, in time, something more if you were amenable." Hannah's cheeks flushed. "I've only been a widow for 9 months, Miles. I know, and I'm not pushing for anything you're not ready for. I'm just laying my cards on the table, so to speak." Hannah stood and moved to the window, looking out at the moonlit snow. "When Thomas died, I thought my life was over. I existed only for my children. Now you come along and suggest there might be a future I hadn't imagined." Miles joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "There is a future, Hannah, for all of us." She turned to face him, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm afraid, Miles, afraid to hope again." "Hope is never wasted," he said softly, "even when it doesn't lead where we expect." Their conversation was interrupted by a cry from the children's room. Little Sarah had woken from a nightmare. Hannah moved to go to her, but Miles gently touched her arm. "Let me," he said. "You've been on your feet all day." Hannah watched as Miles entered the children's room, his tall frame ducking through the low doorway. She heard his deep voice soothing Sarah, and the child's cries quickly subsided. When he didn't immediately return, Hannah peeked into the room. Miles sat on the edge of Sarah's bed, his large hand smoothing her hair as he softly sang a lullaby. The tenderness of the scene brought fresh tears to Hannah's eyes. This man, who had entered their lives as a potential adversary, was now a protector and friend. The following week brought a brief thaw, turning the snow to slush and revealing patches of muddy ground. Miles decided it was time to ride the boundaries of the property to better understand what he had purchased. "Would you like to come with me?" he asked Hannah over breakfast. "The children could stay with Mrs. Thompson in town. She mentioned wanting to see them when I was there last." Hannah agreed, eager to escape the confines of the house and to show Miles the full extent of the farm. Mrs. Thompson, a kindly widow who ran the general store, was happy to watch the children for the day. As they rode side by side, Hannah pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the land where Thomas had first planted wheat, where Emma had learned to swim in the creek during summer, the hill where they picnicked on rare days of leisure. "You love this place deeply," Miles observed as they paused atop a rise overlooking the property. "It's more than land to me," Hannah admitted. "It's a history, a legacy I hope to pass on to my children." And now, Miles turned in his saddle to face her. "Now I'm grateful they still have a connection to it, thanks to you." Miles dismounted and helped Hannah down from her horse. They stood together, surveying the rolling landscape. "I had a farm once in my youth," Miles said unexpectedly. "My father's place in Kentucky, Lost it during the war. Hannah was surprised by this revelation. I didn't know you were from Kentucky, born and raised until the fighting started. After the war, there was nothing left to go back to. That's when I headed west, learned to work cattle. Is that why you wanted land of your own again? Miles nodded. A man needs roots, Hannah, something that can't be taken away. Nothing is truly secure, she countered softly. I learned that when Thomas died. People leave us, yes, but the land remains. Miles gestured to the expanse before them. This farm will outlast us both. What matters is what we do with it while we're here. Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They were both survivors, both seeking stability in a world that offered few guarantees. As they prepared to remount their horses, Miles paused, his attention caught by something in the distance. Hannah, look there. Following his gaze, Hannah spotted a group of riders approaching from the west. You recognize them? Miles asked, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. Hannah squinted against the sun. It's difficult to tell from this distance, but that looks like Jensen's group. Jensen, Ethan Jensen. He owns the large cattle operation west of here. He tried to buy our farm multiple times before Thomas died and again after. He wasn't happy when Blackwell sold it to an outsider. Miles frowned. Why would he want your property so badly? Water rights, Hannah explained. Our farm controls access to the best section of the creek. Without it, his cattle have to travel much farther to drink during dry spells. The riders drew closer, and Miles could now make out 5 men, the one in front presumably Jensen himself. He was a large man with a bushy beard and a stern countenance. Mrs. Parker, Jensen called out as they approached. Surprised to see you still here. Word in town was you'd been evicted. As you can see, Mr. Jensen, that's not the case, Hannah replied coolly. Jensen's gaze shifted to Miles. And you must be the new owner. Irwin, is it? Miles Irwin, he confirmed, stepping slightly in front of Hannah. Can I help you with something? Jensen's smile didn't reach his eyes. Just being neighborly. Wanted to introduce myself and discuss the water situation. My cattle need access to that creek of yours. The creek runs through the property I purchased, Miles stated. If you're looking for water rights, we can discuss terms. Jensen's expression hardened. Blackwell led me to believe the new owner would be more cooperative. I'm cooperative with fair deals, Miles replied evenly. What are you offering? Same as I offered the late Mr. Parker access to the creek in exchange for grazing rights on the western section of your property. Hannah touched Miles's arm. That section has the best soil for spring planting. Miles nodded, understanding the implication. I'm afraid that won't work for us, Mr. Jensen, but I'm open to other arrangements that don't compromise our farming operations. Jensen's face reddened. Listen here, Cowboy. You're new to these parts, so maybe you don't understand how things work. That creek is vital to my operation. And this farm is vital to ours, Miles countered, his voice steady but firm. I'm not looking for trouble, Jensen, but I won't be bullied either. The tension between the men was palpable. Hannah watched as Jensen's hand hovered near his holster, his men shifting restlessly behind him. Perhaps we could revisit this discussion another time, Hannah suggested, trying to defuse the situation. When everyone's had a chance to consider alternatives. Jensen glared at her, then back at Miles. Fine, but don't think this is over, Irwin. That water will flow to my cattle one way or another. With that ominous warning, Jensen wheeled his horse around and the group galloped away, leaving Miles and Hannah standing in tense silence. I'm sorry, Hannah said once they were gone. I should have warned you about Jensen earlier. Miles shook his head. Not your fault. Men like that exist everywhere thinking they can take what they want through intimidation. He's dangerous, Miles. He has influence in the territory, and he's not used to being denied. Neither am I. Miles helped Hannah back onto her horse. But we'll need to be cautious. Keep the children close to the house for now. As they rode back, Hannah couldn't help but worry. Jensen's threat hung over them like a storm cloud, threatening the fragile peace they had found. The encounter with Jensen cast a shadow over the following days. Miles took additional precautions, checking the boundaries of the property daily and keeping his revolver within reach. Hannah noticed his vigilance and appreciated it, though she hoped Jensen's threats were merely bluster. One evening in late February, as a fresh snowfall blanketed the farm, Miles sat at the kitchen table cleaning his revolver while Hannah mended clothes by the fire. The children were asleep, and the house was quiet except for the occasional pop from the burning logs. "Jensen hasn't made any moves," Miles observed, breaking the companionable silence. "It's too cold," Hannah replied without looking up from her sewing. "He'll wait until spring when the water becomes more valuable." Miles reassembled his weapon with practiced efficiency. "By spring, we'll be better prepared." Hannah set down her mending. "What do you mean?" "I've sent for some men I worked with in Texas, good cowboys who know how to handle themselves. They'll help us establish the cattle operation and provide extra security." Hannah's eyes widened. "You're bringing more people here, just 3 or 4. They'll bunk in the barn or build a small bunkhouse once the weather permits." Miles noticed her concerned expression. "Is that a problem?" "No, it's just, this place will be changing so much. Sometimes I wonder if Thomas would recognize it." Miles set his gun aside and moved to sit beside her. "Your husband dreamed of making this farm prosper, didn't he?" Hannah nodded. "Then I think he'd approve of what we're doing, securing its future, protecting it for your children." "Our children," Hannah corrected softly. At Miles's surprised look, she clarified. "That's how they think of themselves now, our children. Emma asked me last night if you were going to be their new father." Miles was momentarily speechless. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was something you and I would need to discuss." Hannah's cheeks flushed as she met his gaze. "We haven't really talked about what this is between us." Miles took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Hannah, I came to Dakota Territory looking for land, not love, but I've found both." Her breath caught. "Miles, let me finish," he said quietly. "I know it's been less than 2 months. I know you're still grieving Thomas. I'm not asking for promises or commitments. I'm just telling you that my feelings have grown beyond partnership or friendship." Hannah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I feel it too, and it frightens me how quickly you've become essential to us, to me." Miles lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "We can take this as slowly as you need." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Then Hannah leaned forward and, with a courage that surprised even her, placed a soft kiss on Miles's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saying we have time." March arrived with warmer temperatures and the first hints of green beneath the melting snow. True to his word, Miles's friends from Texas arrived, 3 weathered cowboys named Sam, Daniel, and Jacob. They set up temporary quarters in the barn and immediately set to work helping Miles repair fences and prepare for the cattle he planned to purchase. Hannah found herself enjoying the company of the new arrivals. They were respectful and hardworking, and the children were fascinated by their stories of life on the open range. Even little Sarah, normally shy with strangers, took to following Daniel around, whom she dubbed the funny one for his silly faces and exaggerated tales. One afternoon, as Hannah hung laundry on the line, she overheard Sam speaking to Miles near the corral. "She's a fine woman," Sam was saying. "And those kids are something special." "They are," Miles agreed, his tone warm. Never thought I'd see the day when Miles Irwin would settle down with a ready-made family." Hannah stilled, listening more intently. "Neither did I," Miles admitted. "But life has a way of surprising you." "Have you asked her yet?" Sam inquired. There was a pause before Miles responded. "No, it's too soon. Her husband's only been gone 10 months and we've known each other just over 2. When you know, Sam said sagely. My pa courted my ma for just 6 weeks before they married. They had 47 years together before she passed." "Hannah needs time," Miles insisted, "and I'm willing to wait." Hannah's heart raced as she realized what they were discussing. Marriage. Miles was considering marriage. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. That evening, a spring storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain that turned the snow to slush and flooded the lower fields. Miles and his men worked tirelessly to divert water from the barn and storage cellar. Hannah kept coffee brewing and food ready as they came in and out, soaked to the skin but determined. By midnight, the rain had subsided and the immediate danger had passed. The men, exhausted, retired to the barn while Miles returned to the house. Hannah met him at the door with a towel. "You're drenched," she scolded gently. "You'll catch your death." "Wouldn't be the first time I've been soaked through," Miles replied with a tired smile, accepting the towel gratefully. "The creek's running high. We'll need to keep an eye on it." Hannah nodded, then hesitated before speaking. "I heard you and Sam talking earlier about me." Miles froze in the act of drying his hair. "Hannah, it's all right," she assured him. "I'm not upset, I want you to know that I'm thinking about it too." "About what?" Miles asked, his voice carefully neutral. "About us. About marriage." Hannah took a deep breath. "I love Thomas deeply. Part of me always will. But these past months with you have shown me that there can be room in my heart for someone new." Miles dropped the towel and took her hands in his. "Hannah, are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm ready. Not to forget Thomas, but to move forward. With you." Miles's face broke into a smile that transformed his features. Without a word, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Hannah relaxed against his chest, feeling for the first time in nearly a year that she was exactly where she belonged. "I want to do this properly," Miles said, finally releasing her. "When the time is right, not standing in the entryway with me smelling like a wet horse." Hannah laughed, the sound light and free. "I don't need proper, Miles, I just need you." Their first kiss was tentative, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened into something more profound. When they parted, both were breathless, eyes shining with emotion and promise. A small voice from the hallway broke the moment. "Mama, Mr. Miles." They turned to find Emma standing in her nightgown, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What are you doing awake, sweetheart?" Hannah asked, moving toward her daughter. "The thunder scared Sarah. She's crying." Miles followed Hannah to the children's room, where they found Sarah huddled beneath her blankets, tears streaking her small face. James sat beside her, trying unsuccessfully to comfort his little sister. "It's just the sky making noise," he was telling her. "Like Mr. Miles's stomach when he's hungry." Despite the situation, Hannah had to suppress a smile at her son's explanation. Miles knelt beside Sarah's bed. "The thunder does sound scary, doesn't it? Would it help if I told you a secret about thunder?" Sarah peeked out from under her blanket, curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "What secret?" "Thunder is just the angels moving furniture in heaven," Miles said solemnly. "Sometimes they drag the heavy pieces across the floor, and that's what makes the big booming sound." Sarah's eyes widened. "Really, really," Miles confirmed. "My mother told me that when I was about your age and afraid of storms." "Is your mother in heaven?" Sarah asked innocently. "Yes, she is, and I bet she's helping move the furniture right now." A crack of thunder punctuated his words and Sarah jumped but then giggled. That was a really big chair, Miles smiled. Must have been. Now, do you think you can go back to sleep? The angels will be done soon. Sarah nodded, settling back under her blankets. Will you stay until I fall asleep? Miles looked to Hannah, who nodded her approval. Of course I will, little one. Hannah herded Emma and James back to their beds, then stepped back to watch as Miles sat beside Sarah, his large hand gently stroking her hair until her eyelids grew heavy and finally closed. In that moment, Hannah knew with certainty that she had made the right decision. This man, who had come to them as a stranger in the midst of crisis, was now the foundation upon which their new life would be built. As April brought the first true signs of spring, the farm came alive with activity. Miles and his men began constructing a small bunkhouse, while Hannah and the children planted the kitchen garden. The creek that had caused such tension with Jensen remained high from the spring melt, providing ample water for both the farm and the first cattle. Miles had purchased a modest herd of 30 head that would serve as the foundation for his breeding program. One sunny afternoon, as Hannah taught Emma how to thin seedlings in the garden, she glanced up to see a cloud of dust approaching from the direction of town. As the rider drew closer, she recognized Blackwell's clerk, a nervous young man named Timothy. Mrs. Parker, he called out, reining in his horse. Is Mr. Irwin about? I have urgent business. Miles, hearing the commotion, emerged from the barn. I'm here. What's the matter? Timothy dismounted, clutching a leather portfolio. Mr. Blackwell sent me. There's been a filing at the land office questioning your deed. Questioning my deed, Miles repeated, frowning. On what grounds? Mr. Jensen claims there was a prior agreement giving him first right of purchase to this property. Timothy extracted a document from his portfolio. He's petitioned the territorial court to invalidate your purchase. Hannah moved to Miles's side, her face pale. That's a lie. Thomas never made any such agreement. Mr. Blackwell suspected as much, Timothy said, handing the paper to Miles. But Jensen has influence, and the court has agreed to hear the case next month. Miles scanned the document, his expression hardening. Jensen's claiming he had a verbal agreement with Thomas Parker, witnessed by his foreman. Witnessed by his foreman, Hannah repeated incredulously. That's convenient. Jensen's playing a dangerous game, Miles muttered. Blackwell handled the sale legally. All the paperwork is in order. Timothy shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Blackwell asked me to tell you that Jensen visited the bank yesterday. He made some threats about what might happen if the sale wasn't reversed. Miles's jaw tightened. Did he now, Miles? Hannah said softly, placing a hand on his arm. We need to be careful. Jensen won't stop at legal maneuvers. Miles nodded, then turned back to Timothy. Tell Blackwell I appreciate the warning. We'll be ready for the court date. After Timothy departed, Miles gathered his men to explain the situation. Sam, Daniel, and Jacob listened grimly, exchanging knowing glances. Sounds like this Jensen fella doesn't play by the rules, Sam observed. No, he doesn't, Miles agreed. Which means we need to be on alert. From now on, no one goes out alone and someone stays with Hannah and the children at all times. The men nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. That night, as Miles and Hannah sat on the porch watching the sunset, she broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. What if Jensen wins in court? Miles took her hand. He won't. The sale was legitimate and Blackwell will testify to that. But if he does, what then? Miles was silent for a moment, considering. Then we'll fight it, appeal to a higher court if necessary. And if that fails, Hannah, Miles turned to face her, his expression serious. I won't lose this farm, I won't lose our home. Whatever happens in court, I promise you that. She studied his face in the fading light, drawing strength from his determination. "I believe you, Miles, but I'm still afraid." "Fear is natural," he told her, "but it doesn't control us. We do what needs doing despite it." Hannah leaned against his shoulder, taking comfort in his solid presence. "When this is over, when Jensen is no longer a threat, will you ask me properly what you and Sam were discussing?" Miles smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "The very next day, Hannah Parker. The very next day." The following weeks passed in a state of heightened vigilance. Miles and his men took turns patrolling the property, while Hannah kept the children close to the house. The tension was palpable, but they maintained a semblance of normalcy for the children's sake, continuing with planting and the daily chores that farm life demanded. One evening, as dusk settled over the land, Jacob rode in at a gallop, his horse lathered and breathing hard. "Jensen's men are cutting fences on the north boundary," he reported. "At least 4 of them." Miles immediately sprang into action, instructing Sam to stay with Hannah and the children while he, Daniel, and Jacob rode out to confront the trespassers. Hannah watched them go, her heart in her throat, then hurried the children inside. "Why do we have to stay in the house, Mama?" James asked as she closed and barred the door. "There are some men on our land who shouldn't be there," Hannah explained, trying to keep her voice calm. "Miles and the others have gone to ask them to leave." "Is it the bad man, the one who wants our water?" Emma asked perceptively. Hannah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, but don't worry, Miles will handle it." Sam positioned himself by the window, rifle at the ready. "They'll be all right, Mrs. Parker. Miles knows how to handle himself." Hannah busied herself preparing dinner, though her appetite had vanished. She kept the children occupied with stories and games, all the while straining to hear any sound of the men's return. It was fully dark when they finally heard horses approaching. Sam peered out the window, then relaxed. "It's them." Hannah rushed to the door as Miles, Daniel, and Jacob dismounted. In the lantern light, she could see a gash on Miles's forehead and what looked like a developing bruise on his jaw. "What happened?" she demanded, ushering them inside. "We caught them red-handed," Miles said, wincing as she examined his wound. "They didn't take kindly to being interrupted." "There was a scuffle," Daniel elaborated, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Jensen's foreman drew first, but Miles here was quicker." Hannah's blood ran cold. "You shot someone?" "No," Miles assured her quickly. "Just convinced them it wasn't worth pushing further." They retreated, but not before promising to return with more men. "This is escalating too quickly," Hannah said, dabbing at the cut on Miles's forehead with a damp cloth. "Someone's going to get killed." "Not if I can help it," Miles replied grimly. "First thing tomorrow, I'm riding into town to speak with the sheriff. This has gone beyond property disputes. Jensen's men were armed and threatening." Hannah knew the territorial sheriff was a notorious procrastinator who preferred to let disputes resolve themselves rather than intervene. "Will he help?" "He'd better," Miles said. "Because if he doesn't and Jensen's men come back, I can't guarantee how it will end." The next morning, Miles rode to town as planned, taking Jacob with him while Sam and Daniel remained at the farm. Hannah spent the day anxiously awaiting their return, jumping at every sound. When Miles and Jacob finally returned in the late afternoon, Miles's expression told her everything she needed to know before he even spoke. "The sheriff claims his jurisdiction doesn't extend to property disputes," Miles reported bitterly. "Says we need to wait for the court's decision next week." "And if Jensen's men come back before then?" Hannah asked. "The sheriff suggested we avoid confrontation," Miles quoted with disgust. "As if we provoked them by protecting our own property." Hannah sank into a chair, disheartened. "So we're on our own." "Not entirely," Jacob interjected. "We stopped by the saloon on the way back. Word of Jensen's tactics has spread. Several of the local ranchers aren't too happy about it, afraid they might be next if he succeeds. 3 of them offered to ride out if we need help. Miles nodded. Jensen's made enemies. We might be able to use that to our advantage. That night, after the children were asleep, Miles and Hannah sat at the kitchen table, poring over the deed and sale documents, looking for anything that might strengthen their case in court. The lamplight cast long shadows as they worked, the house quiet except for the occasional creak of the settling structure. "There's nothing here that suggests any prior claim," Hannah said, pushing a strand of hair from her face. "The title was clear when Thomas purchased it, and again when it transferred to you." "Jensen's lying," Miles agreed, "but lies can be convincing with the right witnesses." Hannah closed the ledger she had been reviewing. Thomas kept meticulous records. "Every conversation, every deal he made is noted here. There's not a single mention of an agreement with Jensen." Miles reached for her hand across the table. "That could be crucial evidence. Will you testify to that effect?" "Of course," Hannah said without hesitation. "I won't let Jensen steal what's ours." The word ours hung between them, a testament to how far they had come since that snowy night in December when Miles had first arrived. "Hannah," Miles began, his voice taking on a serious tone. "If things go badly in court, they won't," she interrupted. "But if they do," he persisted, "I want you to know that my commitment to you and the children doesn't change. We'll find another place, start again if necessary." Hannah squeezed his hand. "This is our home, Miles. We'll fight for it together." The day before the court hearing, Jensen made his move. It began with a single rider approaching the farm at midday. Jensen himself, unarmed and alone, requesting to speak with Miles. Sam escorted Jensen to the porch, where Miles waited, his stance wary but composed. "Irwin," Jensen greeted him curtly, "I thought we might come to an arrangement before tomorrow's unpleasantness." "What kind of arrangement?" Miles asked, though he already suspected the answer. "A simple one. You sign over the water rights to me, permanently and irrevocably, and I withdraw my claim against your purchase." Miles studied the older man, noting the confidence in his bearing. "And if I refuse?" Jensen shrugged. "Then we let the court decide. But I should warn you, I've been in this territory a long time, made a lot of friends in high places, the judge included." "Are you saying the court is corrupt?" Miles asked directly. "I'm saying life is often unfair," Jensen replied with a thin smile. "Especially for newcomers who don't understand local customs." Miles crossed his arms. "Well, here's a custom you should understand, Jensen. I don't respond well to threats." Jensen's smile faded. "This is your last chance, Irwin. The water rights or you lose everything." "The water comes with the land," Miles stated firmly. "They're not separate and they're not for sale. Now I suggest you leave before I forget my hospitality." Jensen's face darkened with anger. "You're making a grave mistake." "Wouldn't be my first," Miles replied evenly. "Won't be my last." As Jensen mounted his horse to leave, he delivered a final warning. "Be ready, Irwin. One way or another, that water will be mine by this time tomorrow." Hannah, who had been listening from inside the house, joined Miles on the porch as Jensen rode away. He seemed confident. "Too confident," Miles agreed, a troubled expression crossing his face. "I think he has something planned for tomorrow." "What can we do?" Hannah asked. Miles pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Prepare as best we can and trust that truth will prevail." That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, there was a tentative knock at the door. Miles answered it, hand on his revolver, only to find Timothy, Blackwell's clerk, standing nervously on the porch. "Mr. Irwin, Mrs. Parker," he said, removing his hat. "I've come to warn you. Mr. Jensen visited the judge this afternoon. I overheard them discussing tomorrow's hearing." "What did you hear?" Miles asked, ushering the young man inside. Timothy glanced around as if afraid of being overheard. "The judge has already decided in Jensen's favor. The hearing is just for show." Hannah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's illegal. It's Dakota Territory, madam," Timothy said apologetically. "The law is flexible in these parts." Miles's jaw tightened. "Does Blackwell know about this?" Timothy nodded. "He suspects, which is why he sent me. He can't act openly against Jensen, but he wanted you to be prepared." "Thank you, Timothy," Hannah said sincerely. "You've taken a risk coming here." The young man smiled shyly. "Mr. Blackwell has always spoken highly of your family, Mrs. Parker. And he respects Mr. Irwin for honoring his commitments. He says there are too few men of integrity left in these parts." After Timothy departed, Miles gathered his men to discuss this new development. The mood was somber as they considered their options. "If the judge is corrupt, we don't stand a chance in court," Sam pointed out. "Then we don't let it get to court," Miles decided. "Jensen wants the water rights. Let's make him think he's won them another way." "What do you have in mind?" Daniel asked. Miles outlined his plan, a risky strategy that depended on timing and Jensen's predictable greed. The men listened attentively, offering suggestions to refine the approach. "It could work," Jacob acknowledged when Miles finished, "but it's dangerous." "So is letting Jensen steal this farm through a corrupt court," Miles countered. "At least this way we fight on our terms." The men nodded in agreement, and they spent the next hour finalizing the details. When they were done, Miles sought out Hannah, who was tucking the children into bed. "They finally fell asleep," she whispered as he entered the children's room. "They sensed something was wrong, even though I tried to hide it." Miles looked down at the sleeping forms of Emma, James, and Sarah. In the short months he had known them, they had become as precious to him as if they were his own flesh and blood. "Hannah, I need to tell you what we're planning," he said softly, leading her from the room. In the privacy of the kitchen, Miles explained his strategy. Hannah listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "It's too risky," she objected when he finished. "Jensen won't hesitate to kill you if he gets the chance." "It's the only way to save the farm," Miles insisted. "If we lose in court tomorrow, it's over. Jensen will have legal authority to take the property." "The farm isn't worth your life," Hannah said fiercely. "Nothing is worth that." Miles took her hands in his. "This isn't just about the farm anymore, Hannah. It's about standing up to men like Jensen, who think they can take whatever they want through intimidation and corruption. If we don't stop him now, he'll only grow bolder." Hannah searched his face, seeing the determination in his eyes. She knew that look by now. Miles had made his decision. "Promise me you'll be careful," she finally said. "Promise me you'll come back to us." Miles pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I promise, Hannah. Nothing could keep me from returning to you and the children." They stood together in the quiet kitchen, drawing strength from each other as they prepared to face the most significant challenge of their new life together. The morning of the court hearing dawned clear and mild, with no hint of the tension that gripped the Parker farm. As planned, Miles left before sunrise with Sam, ostensibly heading to town for the hearing. Hannah and the children, along with Daniel and Jacob, remained at the farm, everything arranged to give the appearance of a normal day. By mid-morning, Hannah was working in the garden with Emma when she spotted dust on the horizon, riders approaching from the direction of Jensen's ranch. Her heart pounded as she counted 6 men, Jensen at their head. "Emma, go inside and stay with your brother and sister," Hannah instructed calmly. "Tell Mr. Daniel our visitors have arrived." As Emma ran to the house, Hannah straightened and removed her gardening gloves, presenting a composed figure as Jensen and his men drew near. Daniel emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but pointed downward, while Jacob positioned himself on the porch, similarly armed. "Mrs. Parker," Jensen called out as they halted a few yards away. "Where's your cowboy? Court starts in an hour." "Mr. Irwin had business in town," Hannah replied evenly. "He'll meet us at the courthouse." Jensen smirked. "Is that so? Well, it seems he's abandoned you at a crucial moment. Perhaps he's reconsidered his position." "Miles would never abandon us," Hannah stated with absolute conviction. "Unlike some, he understands the meaning of honor." Jensen's face darkened at the implied insult. "Honor won't save your farm, Mrs. Parker. Now, where are the water rights documents Irwin prepared?" Hannah feigned confusion. "What documents? Don't play games," Jensen snapped. "My source at the bank informed me that Irwin drew up water rights documents yesterday. A last-minute attempt to salvage something from his failing position, no doubt." Hannah allowed a flicker of surprise to cross her face. "I wasn't aware of any such documents." "If they exist, Miles must have taken them to town." Jensen studied her face, trying to determine if she was lying. "Search the house," he ordered his men. "The papers must be there." Daniel stepped forward, rifle now raised. "You're not entering this house, Jensen." "You're outnumbered," Jensen pointed out, "and the law is on my side. The judge has already assured me of that." "The law doesn't permit breaking and entering," Jacob called from the porch, "or trespassing. You're doing both right now." Jensen laughed harshly. "By this afternoon, this property will be mine. I'm simply conducting an inspection of my future acquisition." While this confrontation unfolded at the farm, Miles and Sam had indeed ridden toward town, but only until they were out of sight of the house. Then they had cut across country to approach Jensen's ranch from the rear exactly as Miles had anticipated. Jensen had left only a skeleton crew behind in his eagerness to intimidate Hannah. The two men easily overpowered the single guard left at Jensen's house and gained access to his office. There, as Miles had suspected, they found evidence of Jensen's corrupt dealings not just with the judge, but with various officials throughout the territory. Most damning of all was a ledger detailing bribes and threats used to acquire properties from other farmers and ranchers over the years. "This is better than we hoped," Sam whispered as Miles carefully placed the documents in his saddlebag. "This will ruin him." "Only if we make it back in time," Miles replied. "Let's go." Back at the farm, the standoff continued. Jensen's patience was wearing thin as his men reported finding no documents in their search of the outbuildings. "Enough of this," Jensen snarled, drawing his revolver. "Mrs. Parker, I'm losing my civility. Tell me where Irwin hid those papers, or I'll burn this place to the ground. Court ruling be damned." Hannah stood her ground, though fear coursed through her. "There are children in that house, Mr. Jensen. Are you prepared to add murder to your crimes?" Jensen's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance. The tension was broken by the sound of approaching riders not from the direction of town, but from Jensen's ranch. All heads turned to see Miles and Sam galloping toward them, a third horse in tow carrying the bound figure of Jensen's ranch hand. "What is the meaning of this?" Jensen demanded as the riders drew near. Miles reined in his horse, his expression grim. "Change of plans, Jensen. The court hearing is canceled." "What are you talking about?" Jensen's face reddened with anger. "You can't cancel a court proceeding." "I just came from the territorial marshal's office," Miles lied smoothly. "They're very interested in these." He patted his saddlebag meaningfully. "Especially the records of your bribes to Judge Patterson." Jensen paled visibly. "You're bluffing." "You couldn't have. While you were here threatening a woman and children, we were at your ranch," Miles continued. Your man Ellis here was quite helpful once we explained the situation. Showed us right where you keep your private ledgers. Jensen's men exchanged uneasy glances, clearly reconsidering their position. This is absurd, Jensen blustered, though his confidence was clearly shaken. You've committed breaking and entering, theft. And you've committed fraud, bribery, and conspiracy, Miles countered. The marshal is on his way. I expect he'll be here within the hour. Jensen's revolver wavered, then lowered slightly as he processed this development. What do you want, Irwin? I want you to leave, Miles stated firmly. Leave this farm. Leave Hannah and her children alone and withdraw your fraudulent claim permanently. And if I refuse, Miles's expression hardened. Then I hand these ledgers to the marshal, and you spend the next 20 years in prison. A tense silence fell over the group as Jensen weighed his options. His men, sensing the shifting winds, began to back their horses away, distancing themselves from their employer. You've won this round, Irwin, Jensen finally conceded, holstering his weapon. But this territory isn't big enough for both of us. Our paths will cross again. Perhaps, Miles acknowledged, but next time you'll think twice before threatening what's mine. With a final venomous glare, Jensen wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his men following hastily behind. As the dust settled, Hannah ran to Miles, who dismounted and caught her in his arms. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling with relief. "It's over," Miles confirmed, holding her tightly. "Jensen won't trouble us again, not when we have evidence that could destroy him." The children, hearing the commotion had subsided, burst from the house and surrounded Miles, clamoring for details of his adventure. He laughed, lifting little Sarah into his arms while ruffling James's hair. "Did you really go to the bad man's house?" Emma asked, eyes wide with excitement. "I did," Miles confirmed, "but that's a story for another time. Right now, there's something more important I need to do." With Sarah still in his arms, Miles turned to Hannah. "I promised you that when this was over I would ask you properly. I see no reason to wait another day." Hannah's eyes filled with tears as Miles set Sarah down and knelt before her. "Hannah Parker, you came into my life unexpectedly, when all I was looking for was land to call my own. Instead, I found a family. I found love. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Hannah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Miles Irwin, I will marry you." The children cheered as Miles rose and pulled Hannah into his arms, sealing their promise with a tender kiss. In the weeks that followed, news spread throughout the territory of Jensen's hasty departure for parts unknown. The evidence Miles had gathered was never needed, though he kept it as insurance against Jensen's possible return. The corrupt judge, sensing the changing tide, recused himself from any cases involving the Irwin Parker property. Miles and Hannah were married on a perfect May morning, with the farm in full bloom around them. The ceremony was simple but joyous, attended by friends from town and neighboring farms. Emma, James, and Sarah stood proudly beside them as the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. "I never expected to love again," Hannah whispered to Miles as they danced under the stars that night, their guests celebrating around them. "You saved more than our home that winter day. You saved us." Miles drew her closer. "You saved me too, Hannah. I was a drifter with a dream of land but no vision of what to do with it. You gave me purpose. You gave me family." As summer turned to fall and fall to winter once more, the farm flourished under their joint care. Miles's cattle operation grew steadily, while Hannah's crops provided stability and diversity to their income. The bunkhouse was completed, housing not just Sam, Daniel, and Jacob, but 2 additional hands hired to manage the expanding herd. The farmhouse itself was transformed as well, with new rooms added to accommodate their growing family. Hannah discovered she was expecting their first child together just as the anniversary of Miles's arrival approached. On a snowy December evening, almost exactly a year after Miles had first knocked on her door, Hannah sat by the fire in their expanded living room, watching as he read a story to the children. His deep voice filled the room with tales of adventure and wonder, and Hannah marveled at how completely he had embraced fatherhood. Emma, now 8, leaned against his shoulder while James sat cross-legged at his feet. Little Sarah had fallen asleep in his lap, her small hand clutching his shirt even in slumber. When the story ended, Miles carried Sarah to bed, with Emma and James following sleepily behind. Hannah remained by the fire, her hands resting on her still flat stomach, imagining the child growing within. Miles returned and sat beside her, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Irwin?" Hannah smiled at the name she was still growing accustomed to. "I was thinking about last winter, about how close we came to losing everything. And now look at us," Miles said, his hand joining hers over their unborn child. "A home, a family, land that's truly ours. All because you said I wasn't going anywhere," Hannah recalled, leaning into his embrace. "Those were the most beautiful words I'd ever heard." Miles kissed her tenderly. "And I meant them, then and now. You're not going anywhere, Hannah Irwin, neither am I. This is where we belong, together." Outside, snow began to fall, covering the land in a pristine blanket of white. But inside, warmth and love filled every corner of the home they had built together, a home that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a cold winter's day, when a cowboy had looked at a desperate widow and decided that she wasn't going anywhere.